Hey, good evening. Happy Wednesday. It's Wisdom Wednesday here on the Connector Dots. I'm your host, Kimber Boothe. I'm a pharmacist, entrepreneur, and healthcare leader. I currently serve as a strategic coach and consultant to help pharmacists advocate for roles and resources to advance pharmacy practice. So let me ask you, do you think that you're a connector? These days, well, I don't want to talk about politics because I know you're seeing that all over the place. I want to talk about being a connector. And this term, some of my friends and colleagues started referring to me as a connector in the past, and it started to stick with me. And I kind of came up with a definition because it's not like being a personal or a human connector exists, because if you look up connector, most of the time you find things about electricity. And so kind of when I think about being a connector, it is that. It's like it's connecting through electricity, connecting that energy and sharing it. So that is how I like to think about it. You may have heard me talk before about my logo, on my circles. It stems from my phrase that I often say is how important it is to connect the dots. So when I came up with a definition of a connector, I said that it's an expert, somebody who's an expert at connecting and uniting people, knowledge, and resources. And their success as a connector is stemming from bringing that level of energy and clarity for themselves and others. So that is a definition that I came up with that fit what people were calling me, but it was just hard to kind of put my hands around. And so I've done more research on this topic, and I really feel that there's a lot of competencies that you can gain around being a connector. And I came up with a connector framework that I want to share with you today a little bit more about. We'll talk about how you can do a self-assessment about whether you're a connector or not. And this is fitting because my podcast, which is called The Connector Life, is joining the Pharmacy Podcast Network. That was just announced this week. And so I'll be posting that on my website. It's now on my LinkedIn page and others where you can get access to that. So we'll be linking new episodes there. Every 2 weeks, I'll be interviewing people on pharmacy and innovation, guests who are pharmovators and connectors. I will also be sharing other, topics of interest with alternating with those interviews. So when I talk about being a connector, again, I came up with a framework, and I guess for whatever reason, I like to think about things in fours, or it just works out that way. When I thought about, what does it take to be a connector? And I thought about the competencies, like what knowledge do you need? So it's kind of the knowledge, skills, and abilities. People call it the KSAs, which are the competencies to be a connector. And that is the connectorability that I like to call it. So when we think about that, that's somebody who's actively networking, building relationships, creating their own growth plans, and continuing to develop those types of competencies. So let me tell you what the four are, and then we can go a little bit further. And then I'll actually invite you, to go to my website, linked in the show notes, to kimberbooth.com. And there's a link to get the Connector Secret Score. So the first one is the connectorability. The second is connector alignment, which is making sure you're aligning all of your steps to connect your dots from your mission to execution, ensuring you're not skipping anything and you're connecting those dots to ensure where you're spending your time is on the most important things. The next one is the connector foundation. These are really the tools, resources, and techniques that are going to support you to have optimal productivity and connectedness. I see a lot of people do spend time on productivity, but sometimes people don't. And these are some basic fundamentals that I think are important. And the last one is the connector life, which I've talked about on the connector dots here before, but it really is critical. If you're going to be a connector, you want to ensure that you are also living a connector life, which is where you have balanced excellence in all areas of your life, which again are the four areas that I like to think of as yourself, your family and friends, your career, and your community. So those are the 4 areas. So let's see, I want you to be thinking about, are you a connector? And again, if you go in the notes to this episode here on my live, you can get this assessment to download and get some other success secrets from me. So you're going to be asking yourself these questions, whether you strongly disagree, 1 up to a 5 of strongly agree. And so you're going to think about, are you a connector? Like, just ask yourself, do you embody the definition of a connector? So I'll just repeat it for you. It's maybe a little wordy, but again, for me, it seems to fit what I want it to be based on where it's been used. So a connector is somebody who's an expert at connecting and uniting people, knowledge, and resources. And my success stems from bringing a level of clarity and energy for myself and others. So you would rank yourself there on a scale of 1 to 5. Then you'll start looking at your connector ability. So you would want to think, are you doing these following things? I've mentioned them a little bit already. So are you actively networking and building relationships with others? Actually, I might talk about this a little bit tomorrow, but I recently joined a class, a leadership class of pharmacy students, and they asked me, what's my best leadership tip? And networking and building relationships was one of my best leadership tips to share with them. And then I help others identify and create their own growth plans. So again, it's great that you do it for yourself. I think that's critical. But when you're being that connector for others, it's helping them grow. And I get so much joy and passion from that. And then still definitely asking yourself, do you regularly develop these key competencies in yourself of being a connector? The next area is the connector alignment. As mentioned, it's understanding how you connect the dots from your mission to execution. And so the questions you'll ask yourself here is, I know the mission, vision, and strategic priorities for me and my company. So I think that's important to know. You are probably going to be very aligned with your organization, but you also want to have your own strategic priorities that you're working on potentially for you personally. And the next question you want to ask here is, I spend time on daily activities that align with the strategic priorities and they add value. So we all could look at our calendars and probably see things that do not add value. So this is something you want to do. Again, score yourself on these. Go to the link to download the score. And then the next is Connector Foundation. So again, these are those tools, resources that are the techniques that help support your optimal productivity and what I like to say is your connectedness. So this is, again, more from a productivity perspective, but are you regularly using templates and technology that allows you to extensively be more productive? And the second question is, you include education and training on productivity as part of your professional development plan? So that's important. I definitely have enjoyed the Franklin Covey productivity trainings that also have included information on better use of Microsoft tools, for example, and I have gotten a lot out of those. And then the last area to assess is your connector life. That's having that balanced excellence in all areas of your life, from yourself, your family and friends, career, and community. So the questions you're going to ask yourself here is, I have assessed and planned what I want in each area of my life. So do you see what I'm saying? It's about assessment and planning. It's not just giving yourself a score, because while I do have a self-assessment score just for looking at your connector life to assess that, you really do want to assess it and plan for interventions, because if you don't like the score you have in an area, you want to change that. And the next thing is, I prioritize and spend the right amount of time on each area of my life. So it took me a while to come up with the words for that, the right amount of time. I know people talk about balance and life integration. And, with us as professionals, many times it is a range or a bit of a roller coaster. There is some times where you're spending more time in one of the quadrants of your life. And I think that's okay. I feel like that is balance. When I take extra time off to be with the family, of course, want to disconnect and be totally separate. I think it's important. So that's why I came up with the word the right amount of time, because it depends on what that is for you and where you are and what your priorities are, to ensure, though, you're still having a balanced life, but it may not mean equal amount of time in each quadrant. So after you kind of give yourself a score on each of those, you kind of think about, you would add up your scores. Again, you were scoring each of those questions on a scale of 1 to 5. If you are greater than or equal to 40 points, I would call you a power connector. You should just continue to find ways to grow your strengths and maximize this power, because it is a superpower, as I like to say. And if your score is somewhere from between like 30 to 39, you are definitely a connector. And if you're less than 30, I would say you're more of an aspiring connector, but that is okay. It is absolutely okay. You want to think then about, where didn't you score great? Where didn't you score yourself high? And, what could you do to develop in those areas? So that is my connector self-assessment score that I like to think about with helping people to be a connector. And it does definitely bring you joy and helps you to be more successful in your life and in your career. So I want to invite you to join me for future live connector dots here, usually just about 5:15, most evenings, weekdays. Please sign up in the link, or go to kimberbooth.com/contact, and you can sign up for my email list, and I'll make sure you get access to this, as well as the library of these videos. So I'll leave you with be bold, be a connector, advance healthcare and pharmacy practice. Thank you so much. Have a great night and talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.